Hey everyone, it's time to wrap up September, and September was kind of weird. I didn't really upload any videos apart from my letter to the months, and hopefully by now the review of Going Postal, but overall I forgot the books I read. When preparing for this video, I looked at the books I read in September, and I forgot about half of them. So let's try and talk about the books I read, going strangely in order that I read them, no matter what format. Let's see how that works. The first book I finished was an audiobook that's Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl. And I was in the impression that it was a shape-shifting urban fantasy book. It is shape-shifting, but not in the sense that I thought of. And it is a lot more sexual encounters than I expected and very descriptive. So be warned if you go into this and you don't want to read any detailed sex descriptions, this book's not for you. Overall, it was a really interesting story. Paul is a young man who can shift and shape his body how he wants. So he can make himself bigger, smaller, enhance his sexual organs, or completely change them. And we see him in his, I think, early 20s, where he's trying to find himself. He's trying to find out who he wants to be. He's very sex curious and explores a lot, has a lot of random and loose relationships and encounters. We see him fall in love, we see him getting his heart broken, we see him explore his education. It's sort of a coming of age. I'm not really sure because I feel it ends in the middle without being resolved or anything. The audiobook is rather interesting to listen to. I don't think I would have finished the physical book because, let's be honest, it was way too much sex for me than I really actually cared about. But in the audiobook, it was endurable, it was well done, all of it was well done, it wasn't yucky or icky, it was strange. And you need to be open-minded, but it was an interesting take on a story I probably wouldn't have picked up if I had known what I was getting into. Let's be honest. The next book on my list is Reforged, which is a fantasy story, which is also more a male-male romance and a fantasy take on someone being king and not expecting to be king, but having to do that, and their, let's say, main bodyguard is an ex-boyfriend. And so we start off with the book. I really enjoyed it. We got into the banter between those two. They had a breakup, but the main bodyguard has to protect his king, and he's still in love with him, but he doesn't know what the king thinks, and things go wrong because he's overestimating himself. So there's a lot of things going on. The story follows mainly the new king trying to hold his position and deal with things because all his family was wiped out and everyone's blaming him, but we don't know yet. So it is fun, fast-paced. I really enjoyed it. The romance has some explicit sex scenes, but not that many, and it was really cute to read. I love the banter between the characters. I love the fantasy world, the fantasy setting, and everything. Oh, the fantasy. There's magic in there. There are some creatures. I forgot what they're a mix of, but they died, and the kingdom has found a way of harvesting their bones and matter to create magic and to create protective shells and armor. Sort of, like I said, a lot of what I read is a blur, but I really, really enjoyed this one. The Book of Moods was something I picked up on audio because I was having moods, and I'm kind of annoyed by having moods all the time. So I thought maybe the Book of Moods would help me figure out where they come from, being moody all the time and exploding into people's faces when I'm stressed, which I've been for over a year now, so I've been exploding a lot. Unfortunately, the Book of Moods didn't really give me the answers I was hoping for. It was an enjoyable read, and I think I would have enjoyed it or could have used it more when I was younger, or I would get more out of it if I were younger now. So recommending this to younger readers because it tells the stories of the author and her experience with her moods and how she figured out what to do about them. The solutions, to cut it short, is mostly the usual: know your triggers, don't expect too much of others, get good sleep, eat well. My problem is the good sleep part. I have insomnia, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So yeah, but I still enjoyed it and I would recommend it. The next was an anticipated read for me this year, Mammoth at the Gate, which is the fourth book in the Singing Hills cycle, and I really enjoyed it. I really love the series. I really love hanging out with Cleric Chi, and this time we see them going back to their monastery or abbey. What's it called? I forgot. Anyways, and there are mammoths outside the door, and they want to break in because one of the monks died, and the people outside are their family, and they want to take them back to get buried with their wife. But the monks are saying they need to stay with us, sort of. So we see a little bit of the abbey and the cleric's home. We see their best friend and the relationship there. We learn a little bit about their past. We learn a little bit more about the Singing Hills, what they do, and I really enjoyed it. If you haven't started on this series, get onto it. Short novellas, really fun fantasy stories. Then I read Going Postal. I've noticed I've been way behind on my reread schedule of the Discworld series with my aim to finish all of the books this year. I'm not going to make it. This is book 33, so I have 8 more left. Yeah, not going to happen. But Going Postal is a good starter book. It is, even though it's a 33rd book, it's the first book introducing Moist von Lipwig, and Moist von Lipwig is a fun character. He's a con artist. He's assigned being the postmaster of the post office in Ankh-Morpork and trying to make it work again and reviving it. There is a lot of wonderful banter between him and Lord Veterinary. There is a lot of wonderful character change. We see him evolve from trying to run away to trying to make his best and save the post office. There is a lot of talk about capitalism and criticism and satire around that. We also see a few of the other characters that we know and love from Ankh-Morpork, but it is very low on the fantasy side. So if you've been put off from the Discworld or trying to pick it up and getting into it by the fantasy parts of the books, this is rather low on the fantasy side and more on the story side. So maybe this is your starter book and your first. And now we hit the part of the month where I struggled capturing new content. So I started rereading as I was rereading Going Postal. I also re-listened to Declutter Your Mind. Like it says, it's a book about decluttering your mind. It is not the best way to consume it on audio. I've written in my Goodreads review that it's better to use the book form because it's more a list form of really precise, actionable things of what to do. And this is actually the strength of the book. It is really giving you hands-on stuff without all the anecdotes around it. A lot of times, all the declutter books or self-help books really center around personal stories and anecdotes, like with the Book of Moods that I read, that really make the books interesting. But this one is a hands-on, do this, do this, do this, do this. And for that, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the re-listen. It's very short, so it was basically, I'm not really ready for new content. Which continued after that, when I started re-listening to the Centenal cycle stories, Centenal cycle, by Malka. The first book is Infomocracy, and I'm currently in the middle of Null States, and State Tectonics is the third one, which I'm going to start after that. So I'm including this here to really talk about the books and not mention them in October, even though I'm not counting them. Who cares? Anyways, the Centenal cycle is a sci-fi story. It's set in, I think, 2160-ish. And it's the first book, Infomocracy, introduces us into an election of the micro-democracy. So there's an election being held for the whole world and everyone who participates in the micro-democracy. Micro-democracy, as far as I understand it, is a way of having smaller groups to decide, to include minorities and give them a higher voice or a stronger voice. And there are only a few parties all over the world that are included, and they have some sentinels where the votes are counted and that they can win. And the more sentinels they have, the more they have, or the more power they have in the world. And then there's also a supermajority, and that rules the world for the next 10 years. There is a lot of talk about election fraud and things going on. In this world, there's also something called information, which you can think of a highly evolved Google that is displaying information and cracking down, making sure everyone tells the truth, and and adding disclaimers to something when it's not really portrayed well, or if it's saying something that is not truthful. Sort of like that. I've listened to this book or this series more than once already. I really, really enjoy the characters, especially Mishima and Ken, but I'm always a little bit on the political side. I don't think I understand it fully, but if you are really into politics and different ideas of how things could work, you might really enjoy them for that. Otherwise, they are highly enjoyable. The audiobooks are well done, and I just love listening to them. So that's what I'm doing right now. And the last book I finished is Müdigkeitsgesellschaft, which is a philosophical essay. The English title is Burnout Society, but I really was attracted to the German word because it's tired society, and I just love that word with my tired going on at the moment. I must say I didn't completely understand everything, but I was really intrigued by the philosopher and his take on today's society and looking at other philosophers in the past, how they describe society and what is going on. The book basically takes a look at why society is so tired, exhausted, and has depression and ADHD and burnout syndrome and all these things, why we are so vulnerable for it. And it compares it to last century's society that had a different motivation, because I'm not sure if I can translate the words correctly that they match what the philosophy is in English, but it's looking at how in the past we were more a society that was disciplined to do something, or rather told to do something. We had boundaries and guidelines and stuff, whereas now we are more a productivity or progress society. The outcome of what we do is important, and now we are our own worst enemy, forcing us to do more, and which is exhausting. And also how it is more expected to be you, like just be yourself, and how exhausting that is. I really like that take on things, but I must say I didn't completely understand everything. But I want to read more of this philosopher. And I also DNF'd something, almost forgot. The Adventures of Amira al-Sirafi. And I was kind of disappointed. I listened to the audiobook, I heard everyone talking about it, and I thought I would really enjoy this. This is sold as a pirate adventure, a female pirate coming out of retirement to find some kidnapped person, and there's going to be magic and all these things. I started the audiobook and I really enjoyed the way it was narrated. It was not straightforward. The tone was a little bit, what's the word? I'm lacking words today. The tone was not just blah, 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 but it was sarcastic maybe, and it was addressing you. There are two narrators, and I really, really enjoyed that. But as the story progressed, I listened to about a third of the audiobook. As the story progressed, I was less and less interested in what was going on. I didn't enjoy the way the story was told, and as it progressed, I felt talked down to more and more. And I'm not sure if that was the audiobook narration or the actual words used, but I'm imagining that the audiobook just enhanced or highlighted the tone of the narration in the book in general. So I DNF'd, and I don't regret it. I don't even care how it ended. That's how less interested I was. I didn't even look up spoilers and how the story ended. Well, yeah. And that was my September. September overall, it looks like it was a good reading month, but like I said, it's a blur. I hardly remember anything, but that's for all September. Well, that's just what it is. Let's see what October brings. Let me know in comments how your September was, if you have read any of the books or enjoyed any of the books I talked about, or what you've read. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.